What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back. Today we're going to discuss about the ban list. I know it's a little bit early, and because we know that the European WCQ is going to be held later this year because of just stuff with the pandemic, so we're going to have to basically wait till then to get a new ban list. But even though it's early, let's discuss a little bit about what needs to happen, because the new set that is going to be released soon, Power of the Elements, I doubt it's going to affect the ban list because Konami is notorious for just keeping the newer decks alive, even though they are extremely problematic because we know that splites are going to be a really big problem for the format. But even though that's going to be the case, I doubt there's going to be any hits very soon to the deck. So with the decks that we have right now dominating the meta, we can expect kind of hits that are more of a generic thing to do for the game. I don't feel like there are a lot of archetypes right now that need to be addressed specifically, mainly because they're going to be power crept very soon by the new main booster set. But even though we know that these archetypes are going to be power crept, there are a couple generic cards that are going to be problem even when it concerns to the new decks and for the format in general. So now, before we begin with the video, if you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up, comment down below your own thoughts about the upcoming ban list and what you need and one thing that needs to get hit. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the video. So let's start with the ban section. We have a couple cards. So the first card that I have in the ban section is a card that a lot of people have been wanting for this card to get banned pretty much ever since its release, but this is the first time that there's actually a good chance of it happening, and the card I'm talking about is Mystic Mine. Now, Mystic Mine is a very unhealthy card for the game. It creates a problem that there's a way to basically auto-win games, and if your opponent does not play any way to out it, then they can't do anything with her inherent deck specifically. Now, this has been a problem for a while now. This card was never stronger or weaker throughout any of the other formats, but the thing is, now that it actually did so well at an YCS, there is a good chance of Konami noticing this card and actually hitting it, because in this event, Sky Strikers managed to win the entire event because of this card single-handedly, and Sky Strikers was a deck that nobody was expecting to even top the event, not let alone win it. And not only with the deck alone, but any other deck that was like Branded Despier deck or something like that, basically not a combo deck, either sided or even main deck Mystic Mine. 3 out of 4 top 4 cut, the slots and top cut were maining Mystic Mine in that event, and this is something that the card has never actually managed to do. Even though it has always been a very cheesy way to win, a very non-interactive way to win, it never actually managed to really win in big events. This was the first time this card was so much represented, and it's finally a chance for Konami to hit it, because people were going to keep complaining about the card every single format regardless of how well it did events, but now that it managed to do so well in an actual Konami event, then there is a good chance of this card getting banned, and I'm pretty sure everyone would agree with this. I don't feel like there's anyone who wants this card to stay in the game unless they're playing like a pure Mystic Mine deck or something. That's the only deck they're playing, which if that's the case, then I feel like this time you should want, because you're playing a card that is not going to stay in the game for long. This card is basically a time bomb. It's going to get banned eventually. It's only a matter of time of when Konami finally decides that they've had enough of this card and they're going to ban it, because never ever in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh has a card like this been printed before. Next up we have Artifact Scythe. Now this is not as likely to happen just because it's another way of basically stalling your opponent for an entire turn and then OTKing them back during the next turn because they won't be able to do anything since they get locked out of the extra deck. But this card took a back seat for this format. I feel like it was more relevant in previous format, but still some decks are playing it and it's not very difficult to resolve, especially as long as Needle Fiber is in the format, being able to go into Wonder Magician and stuff like that. Even cards like Tornado Dragon can trigger it, or maybe bring it back from the graveyard or on floor. So Dagda is not something that is going to solve the problem if it gets banned. If this card needs to go, then they have to hit it specifically. Banning Dagda is not going to solve anything. There will be a lot of other ways to play this card even without Dagda. Even maybe playing Artifact Sanctum is a way to get this card without relying on Dagda. Some people used to do that before Dagda was released, but ever since Dagda was released, then this card became very consistent and a very big problem of the game. And even though it's not the biggest issue right now, if it stays in the game, it's going to become relevant again eventually. So I feel like Konami should just outright ban the card now. It has stayed in the game for quite a long time, and it's time for it to go. And the last card here is, of course, Crystron Halqifibrax, the most notorious card in the game right now. This card is very reminiscent to Firewall. It's a card that's caused so much collateral damage until it will eventually get banned, and it will get banned 100% sometime soon. The OCG finally did it, and I feel like this card creates so many other problems in the game that people think that other engines that are actually fine, that they're broken, they should be hit worthy, but they're only hit worthy because of this card. Let's say the Punk engine, for example. People have been calling for the Punk engine to get hit recently because it did surface a lot and it's really good, but think of the Punk engine without Halqifibrax. So what's it gonna do? It's basically a mill engine for mill decks. You can summon Chaos Ruler and then you can summon the Zombie Vampire. Without Halqifibrax being able to go into stuff like King Calamity, the Red Dragon Archfiend, then the engine is not unfair at all. It's just a really good engine that can get you some mills, get your engines going, and it doesn't do anything unfair unless you use Halqifibrax in the comp. And even if this deck gets power crept by Splight, Halqifibrax is a problem even in the future. For example, in Splight itself, Halqifibrax is a really big issue because there has never been a deck before that is able to play tuners and swap frog at the same time, and because of that, the Splight deck can basically summon Halqifibrax, summon any tuner from the deck, that being most of the hand traps. For example, they can summon Ass Blossom from the deck, and then use Swap Frog to get it back to their hand, because Swap Frog does not specify that you have to return a frog or a water monster. No, it just returns any monster from your field to your hand to give you the extra normal. So basically, anything that is accessible to Halqifibrax, you can get it to your hand and not your field because of Swap Frog. And we all know that Splites are going to be tier 0, so we can expect for at least that much of a hit for the deck, because if it doesn't happen, then the deck is going to be even more unhealthy than it should be, and it's still going to be unhealthy whether Halqifibrax or gets banned or not. But at least let's get rid of it, some of it now, because if we don't, it's going to be a really big problem, and the deck is going to at least play for like 3 weeks with the Halqifibrax, because there is no way Konami is going to release a ban list before the 22nd of August, which the European WCQ is going to include, so the deck will have at least 3 weeks to play at full power, be completely busted, and even when Halqifibrax gets banned, it's still going to get busted, because there's no way Totally is going to get banned anytime soon. They want to sell their products, so we can at least expect that much to deal with some of the engines being played right now, and some of the future engines as well. Now that we've addressed the ban section, the rest of the stuff in this list are more of cards coming off and not very much addressing the format, but there are a couple hits here and there. So let's go to the limited section. The first card, and the only card that is a hit, is Limiting Branded Opening. Now, this is not completely necessary, but the branded deck is just so popular that I feel like just giving it a slight hit is necessary, just because a lot of people play it. It's not the best deck by any means, it's not an unfair deck by any means, and it's going to get completely demolished when Splite's released. Maybe we'll see it in tier elements until the Shizu cards come out, but that's going to be in November, so we'll have a lot of time till then. But Branded Opening going to 1 would not hurt the deck so much, for example, as if they would put Branded Fusion to 1. That would hurt a lot, but Branded Opening mainly hits the consistency of the deck, but once you get to your cards, then you can basically keep running the entire game like your own. It would just be a little less consistent, especially for the opening hands, and maybe it would make the deck more normal summon reliant, because right now the normal summon of the deck doesn't really matter too much, because you have an E-Tele like of card in Branded Opening that can get you to another monster, mainly Aluber. But if this card goes to 1, maybe sometimes Veilating an Aluber will be enough to stop turn. So yeah, Branded Opening to 1, it's something that the OCG did as well, and they did hit it more, but I feel like the deck right now, it's not that big of an issue, especially post Power of the Elements, that it needs to be addressed very, very big time. So yeah, this card just going to 1, I think should be enough for now. Now, let's talk about some cards that should come off the list. First, we have Blaster Dragon Ruler Infernos. I've been saying it for a long time, and I'm gonna keep saying it until Konami finally does it. The Dragon Rulers are not an issue. The Dragon Rulers were an issue because in the format they were in, it was a format based on infinite resources, and that's when Dragon Rulers thrive. But right now, Yu-Gi-Oh does not really care about a grind game that is going to keep giving resources every single time. We basically care about locking our opponent for a turn and then OTKing them during turn 3. Dragon Rulers do not support this type of playstyle whatsoever, so let's bring more of them back. Start with Blaster, it's the worst out of the 3 that are left in the ban list, and then eventually bring back Redox, and then Tidal as the last one, because Tidal is the one that has the best utility, being able to Foolish something. But again, even that is not broken anymore, because we have cards like Branded Fusion, Foolish basically any Dark or Light monsters, so that wouldn't change the thing. So please bring back the Dragon Rulers. I know these are cards that a lot of people want back, and they are cards that would either experiment for a deck itself, or put them in a splash engine for anything that they would on for the certain act. Next up, we have Spellbook of Judgment. The OCG finally brought this card back, and I feel like it's time for us to do the same. This card, a lot of people have been calling for it to get unbanned for a long time, and for good reason. This card is not broken anymore because of the same reason as Dragoners. This card gives you resources. It gives you resources for the later of the game because it adds during the end phase, and that does not matter. What matters about this card is being able to summon Jaugen, but we have so many ways to deal with Jaugen now that we did not have back in the day. In 2013, we have cards like Impermanence, we have Droplet, Dark Ruler, we have so many ways to get rid of just one Jaugen, so we'll be able to play through one Fate or one Wisdom and then basically destroy the deck. This deck is not going to do anything if it has one Judgment, and with only one Judgment, it means that most of the time you're going to have to waste either a Magician or a Secrets to get to this Judgment, so you need to have other spell cards to activate fuel it. So yeah, the one Judgment, it will be perfectly fine. Please bring it back, give us back more cards to work with, because we need more decks to play around, especially when we know that we're headed into a tier 0 form. And the last card is going to be the most contradictory, and hear me out on this one. The last card that I want to go limited is Brilliant Fusion. Now, let's check exactly why Brilliant Fusion got banned in the first place. First of all, back then it was being played in Thunder Dragons because it was able to send Thunder monsters to summon Kaminari attack, and then you would be able to basically get either other monsters to basically use for Titan, then get other monsters for Colossus, dump a Thunder Dragon so you can banish it, and then get other access to cards, cards, and also it got banned because of Master Rule 5. Now, both of these are basically non-existent anymore, because Thunder Dragon's Colossus is now banned, so it's not like people would play Brilliant Fusion and Thunder Dragons anymore, and for Master Rule 5, it got hit preemptively, and what happened to the cards that got hit preemptively for Master Rule 5? Cards like ABC's Dragon Buster, cards like Totally Awesome, they all came back, and this is why Konami, even cards like Destrudo, and Konami hit all those cards because they were afraid to see what was going to happen, but now that they start bringing these cards back, even cards like Destrudo, then I don't feel like there's a way for this card to stay in the ban list. And this card, we basically have a much superior version of the card right now, and in Branded Fusion. Yes, it doesn't give you an extra normal summon, but what's better right now? An extra normal summon or an interruption in the form of Mirror Jade? I feel like the answer is pretty obvious. And not only that, but with Branded Fusion, you can send Dark Monsters on top of Light Monsters, because Brilliant Fusion can only send Light Monsters and summon Seraphonite, and also the requirement for both cards are so different. Brilliant Fusion plays a brick in the deck that if you draw it, then cannot resolve Brilliant Fusion whatsoever for the entire game, and also Albaz is a card that if you draw it, not only can you send it from the hand to be able to activate Branded Fusion, but if you don't have Branded Fusion, this Albaz in the hand is not a brick. You can summon it and bait something going second, thread in the Super Poly effect. It's so good. So if Branded Fusion can be in the game at 3 with a lot more searches than Brilliant Fusion would have, I don't see a reason why Brilliant Fusion would stay banned. And also my last point is that in Power of the Elements we are getting new Gem Knight support. So we do get a card that can search a continuous card that summons Gem Knights, and they are printing a new one, but giving us a second target for the new support would be great. This card is legal in the OCG and it does absolutely nothing. So if there is a time to bring this card back, I don't feel like there will be ever a better time for this card to come back because of the new cards and all the reasons I mentioned above. Now let's go to the semi-limited. First we have Water Enchantress of the Temple and Rite of Aramesir. These are the only hits that we have in the semi-limited list and they're pretty obvious. Now the thing is about this engine is that it's an engine that the OCG never got a chance to use with Splight, and this might be a problem for us because the Splites, basically all of their monsters are extenders that you can special summon them from the hand if you just control level 2 monster. They do have an E-Tele spell card, and yes, in the OCG they are playing Diva, which would contradict with the Aramesir engine, and that would be fine because there are other monsters that we can basically replace Deep Sea Diva with. For example, a card like Cupshell, a card that people have been laughing at for the longest time. It might be a decent replacement for a normal summon of the deck because you would be able to draw cards when you use it for Xyz, for Gigantic Splight, or for Link or Splight Elf, and it's a monster that would not contradict the Brave engine. So this engine might make Splight more busted than it was in the OCG, and if it stays at full power, then it's something that is not going to be fun. So at least just semi-limit both of them now, and then you will have to limit them eventually down the path, but please don't leave them at 3. If these cards are both at 3, with Splites coming out, we are going to see a format much worse than what the OCG had, and it was really bad because we were able to see the charts from the OCG, and we know exactly what's awaiting us, so let's not make the deck any more broken than it needs to be. So yeah, these cards need to go to 2, eventually to 1, 100%, but for now I doubt they're gonna do it. They're gonna put them at 2 first, and then once they get a reprint or something, then maybe they will go to 1, but for now, put them at 2, it would be fine, much better than both of them being at 3. Next up, we have Monkey Board. This is a card that got off the list during the previous list, and it's a fine card to even go to 2, and it's going to go 3 during the next list, but we know Konami, they just love putting cards from 1 to 2 to 3 instead of putting them to 3 immediately, because they just like to test the waters. This card is not going to do anything. Pendulums, again, they're getting new Pendulum cards that are going to be much better as a decisive Pendulum deck, being an archetype and not Pendulums in general, and this card is a performable card, so it's not like what we see play in decks like Valiant or in decks like the Draco Slayers. No, it's just a performable card, so please put it back at 3, and then, yeah, put it at 2 now and then at 3, because we know how Konami. Next we have Infernity Archfiend, another card that have been calling for a long time. A lot of people want this card back. Infinities, there are just so many better decks right now that do what Infernity used to do, and it's not like getting a lot of interruptions on the board right now is something exclusive to Infernity, because it used to be. Yes, Infernity used to be the most broken combo deck, if not the only combo deck in the room, but now we have so many other combo decks that can do so much more and so much more consistent stuff than Infernity, so putting this card back to 2 and eventually to 3 would not change it. And the last card is Draco Face Off. Now, this is a card that is very likely to come off the list because of the new Draco Slayer support that we're going to get in future, and this card doesn't really have a reason for being limited right now. It's not the greatest card in the world. Yes, it's an extender of sorts, but sometimes it's a card that basically requires you to play Draco Overlords in your deck as well, the cards that you don't really want to draw. But yeah, this card is not going to be much of a problem going down the future because we are getting new support of the deck. They are going to support it in any way possible, and this is another way to do so. And for the unlimited section, it's basically all the cards that got to 2 during the previous list, and they're going to go to 3 during the next list because we all know that Konami does that. So first we have Pot of Desires. Putting this card at 1 in the first place was basically non-essential. There was no reason for this card to go to 1 when cards like Prosperity exist, which is basically an infinite times better, because it basically gives you an Excavate 6, which any card you want, and you don't lose any resources because you get to choose the cards you banish from the extra deck. Well, this card can, well, Desires can single-handedly lose you games sometimes and basically draw you cards that either you already have or you don't want to, or the extra copies of Desires, because we all know that this happens a lot. We have Benten to 3 with Eva ban. Drytrons are not going to be that good, and even with 3 Benten, I don't feel like the deck would be much better than it is right now. Yes, it'll be a little bit more consistent searching Benten through Benten, but without Eva, the deck doesn't do anything too unfair. We have Tenki to 3, another card that basically supports a deck that got Power Crept to Oblivion, which is Tri-Brigade deck, stopped doing anything, and with the banning of the Griff of the Simurgh monster, and with also the limiting of Recital Starling, the littlest version of the deck just basically got destroyed. The pure version is not fast enough to keep up right now, so give this back. This deck 3 Tenkis, other decks are going to use it, for example like Pure Zoo. It's not a card that is very unfair, depending on the format I guess, but again, if they brought it back to 2, they're not gonna leave it at 2, they're gonna put it 3. We have Dynamite Knight, again True Draco, as long as Diagram is at 1, Card of Demise at 1, and Masterpiece is banned, they cannot do much, especially now that we have Eldritch, which is basically the better version of True Draco right now, so yeah, this card going 3 would not change anything. We have Trickstar Light Stage to 3, with Anaconda banned, Light Stage giving you the basically free link 2 doesn't matter too much, the extender doesn't matter, and especially if Hulk gets banned as well, then basically there won't be any generic link 2 monsters that this card can use very easily, and the back row lock effect is good, but it's very format dependent. There will be formats where a lot of decks play 0 back row in combo formats, and Light Stage is not going to be able to use that effect at all. And Wall of Revealing Light to 3, this card was limited just because of Self-Destruct button. Self-Destruct button was banned a long time ago, and it took a long time for Konami to notice this card was still at 1, so yeah, this card back to 3, not gonna change any. So yep, that's the list guys. I know that format is going to turn for the worse eventually, we need to be prepared for that, and let's just hope that Konami is going to address what they can, because we know that they kinda can't hit new decks even though they're broken, because emergency ban lists haven't happened for a very long time. It would be very surprising if they did something like that right now for a deck like Splight, but maybe we can hope this happens so we don't get completely swallow into this tier 0 format, because we know what's coming, and it might be even worse on the OCG because we have tools that the OCG did not have when this deck was released, so let's hope that this doesn't happen. So yeah, these are the cards that I feel like should get addressed. If you have any other ideas of cards that should come up the list, or maybe they should hit on the list, comment down below. Let's have a discussion and see what we can do to fix the format to the best of our powers, and hopefully Konami will listen and they will try to make the format as enjoyable as possible to their best of their strength. So yep, that's the video guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.